Do you believe in reincarnation? Well, in 1998, in San Francisco, California, a little boy named James Leininger was born. After being taken to a museum that housed World War II planes, James started to exhibit certain behaviors and memories of a previous life. Is this the works of an old-souled child, or is he a candidate for reincarnation? That's what we explore this week on Everything That's Weird. Welcome to the podcast, Everything That's Weird. We are your hosts, Anthony and Brandon. Tonight, we are talking about a very interesting story.
Yeah.
This is the story of James Leininger, and this is a case for reincarnation. Is it real or not?
Yeah, and this is supposedly one of the most believable cases of it.
So I heard about this. I'm always into weird stories. And I heard about this. I saw a YouTube video on this. And I think what I saw was something later in this story. It was either like a 2020 or like a Fox Spotlight or something, some kind of like special segment
Right.
on this kid.
Yeah. I had never heard of it. I had just randomly come across it, and I sent something to you, and you were like, "Yeah, of course I've heard of it." You know? Is it fucking weird? Yeah, I heard it.
So I don't know as in detailed, but it's a fairly modern case.
Yes.
Fairly.
Yeah.
And when I say that, I mean in the last 30 years.
Yeah. I mean, the boy that we're talking about was born in 98.
Okay.
So pretty recent.
And I mean, his mom's in, his dad's in human resources, which is a very, modern job title.
Yeah, he's as soon as I read that, I was like, if you read his mom and dad, it sounds like he's a douche and her dreams don't matter. Right. She sounds like a 50s homemaker.
But all right. So
as the story goes, James Madison Leininger was born on April 10th in 1998 in San Francisco. And like you said, his dad was a human resources executive. And his mom was a resume writer, homemaker, and professional, this is what got me, the former professional dancer. Somebody had to give up their dreams.
Okay.
So, and then in the movie, they moved from Texas to Louisiana, and it was shortly after they made that move, at about 2 years old, James started recanting visions and not having nightmares. I mean, over the time of this story, his nightmares progressively got worse and worse.
And they were like vivid nightmares about World War II.
Yeah, actual him getting shot down in World War II.
Which for a 2-year-old is super heavy, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Right. So, and this is it's a case with most reincarnation stories you hear, and there are several out there, but it's always there when they're really young. They have these vivid memories, and as they get older, they slowly fade. But I'm always surprised at some of the ages they say in these reincarnation stories about when they started talking about certain things, specific things, and how advanced. It's he was 22 months old.
Yeah.
When he first started talking.
In the next segment, I'll address that. But yes, go ahead.
So it all started at about that age when his dad took him to the James Cavanaugh Flight Museum in Dallas, and he was absolutely obsessed with the World War II planes.
Right.
They had to force him to leave. He was throwing a temper tantrum because he did not want to leave.
Right.
And he said his mom, one of the earliest things that happened to him was that they were passing the gift shop, passing a toy shop, when his mom saw this bin full of toys and planes and stuff, and she picked one up and she said, "Oh, look, this one even has a bomb underneath it." Mm-hmm. And he said, "That's not a bomb, Mommy. It's a dwap tank."
God damn it. Right.
Every single article I looked at, they spelled drop W with a W.
Me too.
It's driving me nuts.
Dwap tank.
Dwap tank.
Because that is how he said it.
Yeah. So they started talking to him about it, and it was like shortly after he turned 2 is when he started having these nightmares, right? And he was like freaking out, and he'd wake up and he'd say, "Airplane crash, plane's on fire, little man can't get out." And they were just, obviously they're curious, they're asking him questions, and he starts saying details that are like, it would be one thing if you were having a nightmare and you were like, "I was in a plane and it blew up."
Right.
But he's like, "I was flying a Corsair."
Right.
Right.
Right. Like, how does he know?
So he says he flew a Corsair from a boat. And the name of that boat was the Natomi. He said Natomi. And despite it sounding Japanese, the Natomi was the USS Natomi Bay. There was an actual aircraft carrier called that.
Right.
And he related, over the next few months, he started relating more and more details. And one of them was that he had a friend that was a fighter pilot also, that was Jack Larson was his name. Mm-hmm. But he said he'd been shot down in Iwo Jima. And they'll find out later that Jack Larson actually wasn't shot down. I think it's crazy that there is a Jack Larson.
Right.
But so it was constant with him. He's playing with toys. He's crashing them into furniture. He's breaking them. You know what I mean? But it was like every time they talked to him, he would fill them in on these more and more details. And he would call the American planes Wildcats and Corsairs. And he'd refer to the Japanese planes as Zeeks and Bettys.
Right.
And when his parents later looked into it, they found out that those were the names that they used to go by. Well, Wildcat and Corsair were their names, but Zeeks and Bettys were designated, nicknames for the Japanese planes.
And that is a really crazy detail to remember or to know.
Yes.
That age. Okay,
yeah.
So God.
And the other thing is he would sign his drawings James 3. Now you'll hear people say that's because that was his age at the time. Mm-hmm. But I think he was doing it when he was 2 and 3. So I don't think it was just stuck to 3. I could be wrong, but I think
and my kids don't sign their name with their
age
right. After it.
Yeah, and here's the thing, and you're thinking, well, he's just the second. Well, the person that they believe him to have been was James Houston Jr., making him the third James. So, it got to the weird point where the dad, who didn't believe in reincarnation, blah, 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 he's getting uncomfortable with this thing. So he starts looking into it, and he does a bunch of research. And the more he looks into it, the more everything he's saying is ringing true. I mean,
right.
Down to the names of the planes, the carrier that the plane took off of. Once he starts seeing those, he's like, I got to do a deep dive. You know what I mean? He starts really looking, and he goes in and he finds this Jack Larson in it. That was kind of off-putting for him. I think it was maybe a little relief at first to find out Jack Larson wasn't dead in a plane crash, but the fact that he found Jack Larson and that he would have known James Houston Jr. is super freaky. And it was near Iwo Jima that he was about 21 years old when James McCready Houston Jr. was shot down in an FM2 Wildcat. Okay. Not a Corsair, like he said.
Right.
But later on, they would visit the living sister of James McCready Houston Jr., and she would show him a picture. And the photograph she had of him was him posing in front of a Corsair, which he apparently flew quite often.
So just before we go any further, like, we're not going to dissect this kid's. Here's why. He doesn't have like an ulterior motive.
Right.
All right. So like, he's too young for us to like pick it apart.
Right.
So that's not what we're doing. What
So
we're gonna do,
even if he was incorrect, it would
Right.
most likely be him trying to please what is exciting his parents.
and I think that the story of this story
Yeah.
is that whether or not reincarnation is the thing
Right.
at all, right? And
Yeah.
this is a specific example of a kid that's giving very specific details of a story of somebody that died, and maybe, you know, the spirit that lives in his body is either this guy or somebody around these people. And
Right.
there's been a lot of I think a lot of people, and I say people and I mean news, and this isn't just whether it's Fox or CNN or ABC or whatever, they all kind of try to pick this kid apart, which is dumb to me.
Yeah.
Like, who cares?
Yeah.
The fact, like you said, the fact that he even knows that there's Corsairs and Wildcats.
Right.
I didn't know that.
It's mind
Did you
blowing.
know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Right. So like, okay. So like, we're not trying to pick the kid apart at all.
Right. And,
We're just saying there's
and just
this
like you
story.
said, all those people that were doing that to that they themselves, not a single one of them had an answer for everything. So
Right.
it wasn't like they could debunk everything. They had stuff they faltered on, and like some of their arguments were weak on certain parts, because it was like, and it's like, yeah,
And
so,
like one of the guys you recognize by voice, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
because some of them they're saying it's a lot of anecdotal stuff,
right.
but he attended his dad took him to this reunion at Natoma Bay pilots, and he said James actually recognized the voice of one of the guys there.
Right.
Like, he recognized his voice.
It was Bob Greenwald was the guy's name.
Yeah.
Right. So at this point, this is kind of where the news starts to get involved. But like, where does it end up? So he meets with some child psychiatrist.
Mm-hmm.
But he keeps kind of this behavior and whatever, and his dad takes him to a few of these like things that he doesn't want to leave, and he's recognizing certain things that there's no reason he should even know what they are.
Yeah.
And then they find out about the Natoma.
Mm-hmm.
Natomi, right?
Natoma.
The Natoma. And they realize that there is a guy named Jack Larson.
Yeah. Yep.
And so was he shot down?
No, he was not. He was alive while all this was happening.
Okay.
He was still alive when this story was building traction. But there was, I mean, there were several things that he'd said that verified his statements when he was asking, like, Jack Larson. He had actually found him and was talking to him. It was Tucker.
Yeah.
A guy named Tucker was doing a piece on it, but
Tucker Carlson?
No, it was not Tucker Carlson.
I love.
They only put Tucker on here the whole time, and it took me forever to find out that it wasn't Tucker Carlson. I was like,
Okay.
I can't put this on that. Anyway, his plane was shot in the engines and crashed in the water. He died in the Battle of Iwo Jima. The plane was on fire and sank. He couldn't get out. He flew a Corsair. His plane flew off a boat, and his plane was shot down by the Japanese. And Corsairs tended to get flat tires when they landed. He had also talked about that. So, like, all these pinpoint spots, they were like, you can't dispute these things. He said these things are true.
Mhm.
So, and those are the things that they were talking about, like where the family wouldn't really have that, wouldn't be really privy to that information ahead of time. You know what I mean? Because there was a lot of talk about him taking him to that museum, and maybe that influenced him to say the things he was saying and do the things that he was doing. You know, but
And so
they ran down a list of stuff that was
so
like, you can't.
The kid's now like 24.
Yeah,
and you know, he still remembers these intense like feelings and visions or whatever.
mm-hmm.
His parents wrote a book. You know, he really doesn't have any kind of explanation for like why this happened. And he really tries to stay like out of the public eye.
Mm-hmm.
Which to me, it's like the Bob Lazar thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like when people just really just, you know, have a set of facts that they know and they really try to stay out of the public eye. To me, it's like, okay, you want to pick apart the details, but like, what about like the big facts?
Yeah. And he sat down with Houston's sister, and she was like amazed at the stuff he knew.
Right.
And they even went to, there was a time where they took him to one of the Corsair planes, and he was like walking around at pre-flight check. And he was like, just like a pilot would do his pre-flight check. He was walking around at 3 years old, pointing out all the different things and saying, this needs to be checked and you need to look here and this needs to be done. And you know what I mean? He was going through it like a pre-flight check. They said it was unbelievable.
So what this story is that we have a kid that is very young.
Mm-hmm.
And he is having very vivid recollections of being shot down in World War II. He is living in 1998, 2000 at this point, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And his parents are trying to like manifest this or do research about it or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Well, because they were I think they were kind of naive about all the stuff too. You know, they didn't really know all this information. They had to go look it up. When he'd say things, they had to look it up for themselves. According to them, they had no previous knowledge of any of this stuff. They were amazed that he knew it. They weren't even sure he was right until they looked it up. You know, they were like,
and so at first they're like, okay, whatever. But then they're really kind of into it, and his dad does a bunch of research to find out, like, you know, if what his son is saying is true. Mm-hmm. And then they come find out like a lot of it is true.
Yeah, and like those key facts I pointed out were the ones that were like, you can't dispute that. He said it, and that's exactly what happened according to all his research. Is
this 3-year-old in 2000 like a reincarnated pilot from World War II? And that is the question.
Right. And then they went on, his dad went on, he went on Fox and Friends in like 2012. And James was like 15 at the time. And he said that the nightmares ceased when they did a spiritual release, because I think he was like 11 when they did it. Mm-hmm. They went to because they could pinpoint the site of the crash, like they knew where where he crashed at, and they went out there, and they did this like letting go spiritual release experience at the site of the crash. And he said after that he had no more nightmares, and the vivid memories diminished to, like you said, just emotions and feelings and stuff.
Right. So then after the story comes out, that there's, you know, this kid that has these recollections, it kind of gets picked apart, but nobody ever really like debunks it. They just kind of say there's facts here and there that are inaccurate or whatever.
Right. Not any validity. Nobody had 100% knockdown rate. There was always some part of the story they were like, either they
and
didn't.
all that is really irrelevant because the question is whether or not there's reincarnation.
Right. And there's 5 major religions that believe in reincarnation.
Sure.
And what's funny is that when I was looking at this stuff, I was like, I have never even heard of some of these religions.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's stop here. Those are the facts. Let's go to like the facts of like reincarnation and people that believe.
Yeah, then their beliefs and what people say.
Okay, cool.
If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. Second, there are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Okay, so first off, from my own experience, I have to say that my daughter, when she was very young, said something my other family. And I said, so I didn't want to like push her, you know, but I was super curious. I'm like, hey, what did you mean by your other family? She's like, well, my other mom and dad, you know. I don't even remember what she said, but she's like, my other mom and dad, blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, you had a other mom and dad before me and your mom? And she's like, yeah. And I said, oh, really? I said, how old were you when you had your other mom and dad? She said, 10. And I'm like, God damn it.
Yeah. Yeah. My son did the same thing at some point. And, you know, my wife, she's a big believer. So she, you know, and he started saying that. And she's like, this is amazing. But, you know what I mean? But
so I didn't push her.
You got to be careful around that stuff. Like you're saying, you know, if you think you're onto something like that, it's really easy to lead them into stuff. Kids.
So I didn't push. I specifically, so in college, I took a lot of psychology, and I would not let my wife press her.
Right.
I'm like, no, hold on. We won't get an accurate response.
Right.
I'm like,
she's going to please you. She's going to say what she wants to make you happy.
I said, you can't. I said, you have to show zero emotion. And she's like, but that's freaky. I said, It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. We have to have zero emotion. You know, it has to be like, you know, what color is that crayon? It has to be that benign. Like, it has to be like so blah that she just answers what she knows. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's why I used to say to her, I said, oh, really? You know, like, how old were you with your other mommy and daddy? And so, like, you know, I never wanted to press her, and I could tell when I was, like, pushing it. So I never really got, like, a whole story out of it. I never got, like, anything like this.
Right.
And, you know, maybe that is part of this, but I do feel like there was more. And now that she's older, I've asked her. I said, when you were little, you said, my other family. And she's like, I did? I said, yeah. And she's like, and I said, you said you were 10. And she's like, yeah, but I'm 8. I'm like, yeah, you don't get it. You know?
Yeah.
But when she was 2, she was adamant that there was another group of people that she was associated with. Yeah. And it was so matter of fact that it was flippant. You know what I mean? And my son is not that way. My son is not that way at all. And she was, but like I said, when I say flippant, that's exactly what I mean. she's just like, oh yeah, my mommy and daddy before, and my family before, and I'm like, what do you mean your family before? I kept, but I didn't want to like feed her,
right?
But I was super curious, and I told my wife so. I said, hey, if you want to get an accurate response, we cannot push this. You have to be really cool about how you ask her. That's why we're not psychologists. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's that we don't know exactly how to ask the questions. But, if you are going to ask the questions, that's fine. Be really cool about it so you're not feeding her,
Yeah, it's confirmation bias and observational selection.
Sure. For sure. And a big part of me when I was reading this story and, heard this story, were things put into his subconscious?
Right.
Who's to say?
Yeah,
right?
because only the parents were there. They're the ones.
Right. We weren't there when he was like building Legos.
Right. Now we can all attest that people that have kids that they are always listening.
They are.
They are always listening. You might think that they are off in their own world playing, and they will sell you out in a heartbeat when you say something you don't think that they're paying attention to, and they'll come and say it out loud in front of people, and you just never know what they hear. So they could have been doing the other room in the kitchen going, can you believe this? I can't believe this. Look what I just found. I just found that this and this and this and this. I wonder if he knows about this. Now, if the kid heard it, he just relays it and said, yeah, I know. It's making his parents happy. You know what I mean? It's causing excitement. Kids want to please their parents. Sure. And it's the same. We had those cases. You remember when we were young, there was those cases of the psychologists that kept misleading kids into like therapy with people, and they would come out and say that like their parents molested them.
Well, that was like part of the satanic panic.
Yeah, there were several cases of that where like people came back and said that this happened and that that they were abused and blah blah blah, and then they had to go back through and prove their innocence.
We talk about it like it's Y2K, like whatever, satanic panic, but there was a ton of lives ruined by that.
Yeah.
And
lots of lives. There are people that had to do a lot of work to get their names cleared because they.
Oh yeah, man.
They were told that they were sexually abused their children. Because the kid's just going to keep leading through this thing. They would point out these dolls. Remember, they had the dolls, and they were like, point where they touched you. You know what I mean?
God damn it! It's like South Park.
And if they weren't happy with where they were pointing at, they were like, yeah, but what did they touch you anywhere else? And they just keep pointing until they get it right. And they were like, they touched you there, okay, And it's one of those things where they led kids, because kids will give you what you want. They're people pleasers. Yeah, and like we said in the Zimbabwe one, kids don't lie, but
they're influenced.
They can be influenced. So it's not like they're lying. They're doing what they think you want.
For sure.
If the whole kids don't lie thing is more about if some kid came up and he was telling a lie, all the kids around him would be going, "Nuh-uh, what happened?" It's just like, hey, you're 10. Hey, no, I'm not. I'm 12. Yeah, the kids, it doesn't matter. You're trying to get them to eat for free at a restaurant, and they'll sell you out in a heartbeat.
And, who's to say that this guy's dad didn't just feed him,
Sure.
It's easy.
And completely unintentional.
Or like he's watching History Channel.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He's like got YouTube on, There's a ton of ways he could feed information into the kid without actually saying.
Now they swear that they didn't, but they could have totally done it unintentional and not even realize they were doing it.
Totally.
It's like you said, they're not psychologists, so yeah. And a human resources guy, it's you.
It makes me think that he brought out puppets.
Yeah, it's just like, you think about that as a human resources guy. Where did he touch you? It's like. So there could have been a lot of leading there,
So with that
I'm
being
not saying
said,
it did. I'm just saying there's definitely a possibility.
So with that being said, like I know up until now we've been saying we kind of don't believe in reincarnation. However, I did hear a story about the Dalai Lama and how they find the Dalai Lama. So I don't know if you know this.
I do. They lay out toys.
Right. So they start looking for the Dalai Lama when they know that the current Dalai Lama is dying.
Yeah.
So they take like 8 holy guys and they go and canvass the countryside.
Yep.
And so the last Dalai Lama, they took like some holy relics, and these like holy men basically, and they start canvassing the countryside, like, you know, talking to families or whatever. And this one kid, they're like, "Hey, if it's anybody, they're like," they point their finger.
Yeah,
it's him. And they go up, and he addressed 3 of them by name. And then whatever the holy relic was that they had, he's like, "That's whatever you have in your satchel. That's mine."
Yeah, there's several items, and one of them belonged to the previous Dalai Lama.
And he's like, "That's mine."
It's kind of like on The Last Airbender.
Right. So then he gets brought in because they're not like, this is him. They're like, he has like a vessel that the previous Dalai Lama is using. And they manifest it. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and there's other religions that do that. There's like one where they take bites of apples and throw them in the water to promote.
Right, so they're not like Brandon, you're Anthony, and get out there, kid. They're like,
yeah,
Brandon, you have Anthony tendencies, so like they kind of like work you into it. And that's kind of how a lot of people see reincarnation. So throw it back to
Dalai Lama. They do like wisdom classes. Like they're educated in wisdom, and the signs is the aptitude towards that study.
Yes.
So that's they wise this person. So that's a key trigger is their aptitude for picking up on their wisdom classes. I'm not sure what those entail, but
the way that they see it is like it's like a rebirth. So the body dies, but the soul is on. Is kind of the thing. And you know, whether or not you believe in aliens or whatever, but like in alien interviews and stuff, that's literally what they say.
Right. And then in comes the I don't know how it's going to work. In comes the communist Chinese, and they take over China, and we'll get up Taiwan, and the communists take over the country. Then they usurp Tibet and oust the Dalai Lama, and he's not been back. So
he is not, but he is actively trying to get back into Tibet. And you know, amid like maybe some political pressure, maybe at some point before he dies, he ends up winning that war without firing a shot. And for that, that's pretty amazing. But
yeah, and here's the thing and this probably stuck in their craw was that at one point, I think in the 80s, him and Ronald Reagan draft basically an outline for how the Tibetan government would function if they got it back, and that he would give up all his political and religious power to a temporary democratic government that was until they could vote in a true democratic government, and boy, they don't like that over there, you know.
No.
So that's I think that was the thing that's kept it off the.
But there's a movie called 7 Years in Tibet with Brad Pitt, and it's interesting. It really is interesting to see that, you know, that's not really our way over here, but you know, you hear cases like this as kid, and you know, it's hard to just write it off, because maybe not all of us are like that, or maybe every one of us have that inclination, but you know, it's just not honed, you know.
Right. And now here's the thing with the reincarnation thing is that you hear a lot about like this case right here where the kid was born in 90. The guy died in the 40s. Right. So it's like, what was that space in between, you know? Right. And there's a lot of the reincarnation that I found did that. I did find one though where the kid was born like the next year after the guy died, and that was with some of these cases too, is that their past life that they talk about was a lot older, and the records and all that stuff aren't there to look up.
Sure.
You know, because there was like a woman in Ireland, I believe it was, she went into hypnosis therapy or regression therapy.
Right.
And when she took her back to her childhood, she started talking in an Irish accent, a thick Irish accent, and started talking about her life as this other woman, blah, blah, blah. And that made it hard to confirm this as like a reincarnation story was that woman lived in like the 1800s in Ireland. And they were like, you know, it was so hard to find, you know, the shop that she used to work at or whatever, you know what I mean?
Well, who's to say it's linear? So, yeah, I mean, and that was, like I said, in that alien interview, he's like, you look at it as like two-dimensional, but it's not. Life isn't linear. It's right. And that, you know, when you think about it like that, not that the alien's right in the alien interview. However, when you think about it like that, yeah, it's that's a little bit different of an explanation. Like, you know, who cares when it happened? Who cares that it's, you know, 60 years apart from when the guy died? This little kid was, you know, in the 90s. This kid was a reincarnated fighter pilot from World War II.
Yeah, it's kind of like our story on what's his name with the guy that went into the future. You know, he was saying that all time at all time. You know, it's all happening at once. So yeah, there was the story of this guy named Parmad Sharma. He was born in India in 1944, and the guy that he was supposedly reincarnated from died in 1943. So that was basically like right after he died, he became this other kid. And he had some pretty crazy details that he put out. He used to have this business venture called Mohan Brothers. And when he was little, he would make mud cookies. And he made up a little shop, and he would make these little mud cookies and water, you know, and sell them like as you know, kids play. And after he was like, and he warned his parents about eating curd, and he never touched it himself. And he said it made him very ill after he ate it in his old life, and that he also hated being submerged in the bath because he said he died in the bathtub.
God damn it.
When the parents go and look this up to try and find out, they it turns out there was a family named Mayra, and they ran a soda and cookie shop called Mohan Brothers.
God damn it.
And the guy that managed it died in 1943. And he died after gorging, suffered a gastrointestinal illness and peritonitis. And he eventually died, and he didn't die in the tub, but they were giving him these medical baths to try and cure him, and he died like shortly after one of those baths. So that, I thought that was pretty interesting too. But you're also talking about not only the person that was reincarnated and the person that was who they became, as in the 40s.
How much curd do you have to eat?
I don't know, man. It said gorging on curd. That is something else, right?
There's a Seinfeld where it's
curd.
Like,
it made him.
I'm gonna eat a whole brick of cheese. He's like, yeah, I don't get why you're eating the cheese.
Okay, I got another one though. I thought this was hilarious. Apparently, a software engineer named Tony Sung, who was an employee at Apple, he sent an email to a Buddhist group. Didn't know that they were hip on the emails, but he sent an email to this Buddhist group in Thailand and asked them if he could tell them what happened to Apple founder Steve Jobs after he died.
Okay.
And the answer was that Jobs is now a celestial philosopher in a glass palace that hovers over the Apple headquarters in California. But in Malaysia,
typical,
a group of Jobs admirers performed a religious ceremony after his funeral. During the ceremony, the group each took a bite from an apple before throwing it into the sea to speed up the process of reincarnation. Mm-hmm. And one of the at the temple is convinced that Job has already been born. And he's a divine presence with a specific interest in science and art, and that apparently more specific Job feels there's need. So apparently there's people out there that believe Steve Jobs is reincarnated somewhere.
I'm going to address that in the next segment.
Okay.
All right. So those are the facts. Those are like people that believe in it. Yep. Let's get to what we think.
All right.
So, first, let me start off with Steve Jobs. First of all, I'm not let's see how I say it. I love Apple, everything. But like Steve Jobs doesn't do everything.
Right.
Bill
didn't do everything.
Didn't do everything. Like Bill Gates was a little bit more hands-on.
Yeah.
Elon Musk is a little bit more hands-on.
Mm-hmm.
Steve Jobs was just somebody that put everybody together.
Right. He was a visionary.
Yeah, like there was a reason he got ousted.
Mm-hmm.
He got ousted because they didn't need him. And then when they were like, oh shit, our marketing's going to shit, we're getting our ass kicked.
Yeah.
Let's bring back Steve Jobs. So maybe
right.
Somebody's reincarnated as Steve Jobs. But I do believe in reincarnation. I think that's the only thing that makes sense. Everything else, heaven, hell, there's holes in that. Mm-hmm. And I'm not dissing religion at all, but it makes a lot of sense to me that, you know, you're not quite done. Like, okay, like I'm Catholic. Catholics believe in purgatory. I don't know what the difference between reincarnation and purgatory is. Because you die and then you're reincarnated into like a place where you have to like make everything right to get to heaven. And then you're in heaven. And what is
like
heaven?
You were good, but you weren't good enough.
Right. So like,
you weren't bad enough to go to hell, but you weren't good enough to go to heaven.
But it makes a whole lot of sense to me that you're never dead.
Yeah. And
from a scientific standpoint, energy never dies, right? Mm-hmm. So like, you know, energy has to go somewhere. Right. And, you know, who's to say it doesn't go into some random kid in India or like a turtle in Sri Lanka or like whatever. You know, like life carries on, and that's kind of the whole point, is that you're this small cog and you're trying to make everything better for everybody around you and your environment. And, you know,
Yeah.
So this kid, to me, this is a very normal thing, and I think part of the reason why he's not in the spotlight is because he don't remember any of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like my daughter, we literally just the other day tried to bring this out of her, and we said, you used to say like my other family, and I said, you remember any of that? And she's like, no.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I even tried. I tried to like, you said that you were 10. She's like, I'm 8. Or she's like, I'm 6. I'm not 10. I'm 6. I'm like, okay, whatever. She's like, I'm not even 8, is what she said. Like, okay, whatever. That's not the point. That's not the point at all. The point is, you said you were 10. And she's like, yeah, I don't know what to say, man. Are we going to play water karate or not? Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
So, like, but, when she was little, it wasn't even like she was like a devil child. She just kind of said it like, it's a fact I should know.
Yeah.
Like the sky's blue.
Right.
So I don't not agree with. I don't think this kid was lying at all. This is just like I don't think that the way they find the Dalai Lama is a lie. Yeah, they probably find some kid that has like some kind of recollection like that, and there's kids out there that are special, man. There are.
Yeah. There's
I see all of them on YouTube doing the fucking Rubik's Cube in 30 seconds.
Yeah, I saw a kid juggling 3 Rubik's Cubes and solved all 3 while he was juggling them.
Right. So
Get the fuck out of here.
Right. So what's the difference if he's reincarnated? He probably is reincarnated.
The thing that was fucked up is when I saw that kid doing that, he had a clock next to him.
Right.
It means other people can do it. They just can't do it as fast as he could.
Exactly.
I'm like, what the fuck, man? I can't even do one without pulling the stickers off.
So I always say you don't get it all, and you don't get it all. Like, you're not going to be able to shoot a 3-pointer and do Rubik's Cube. You get one or the other.
Right.
But I do think, either all of us are reincarnated and only some people have the ability to harness, or, there's only a certain amount of vessels, like people to fit in. But whatever the case, I don't know. But I don't not believe this kid. I think this kid was right on. He just, even if he was fed, there's too many things that are a dead ringer for a kid that age to remember. That's
like all. The stuff he said right off the bat.
Yeah, and it's just too much.
Yeah, the stuff he said right off the bat without being coerced in any way, shape, or form that made him curious in the first place. That stuff can't.
And in my opinion, is reincarnation real? Yeah, totally. We're probably all reincarnated, and whether we were a turtle or a person or somebody that died in World War II, yeah, that energy has to live, in my opinion, somewhere else. And why not us? It just makes sense.
Maybe you don't hear about all the other stories because they all turn into animals or plants.
Right. Right. Now you see what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah. No. So you're saying you believe this story?
I believe the story, and I believe in reincarnation. I think it only, like, scientifically and spiritually, is one of the few arguments that make sense. Because scientifically, energy can't go nowhere. Yeah. It has to go somewhere. So, and if you've ever seen a dead body, I was an altar boy, and I've done many funerals. I've been, unfortunately, at many funerals. Mm-hmm. And when you see that body, they're just not there. Mm-hmm. I don't know how else to say that.
Sure. Yeah, no, I get you.
Except they are just not there. It's like skin, bones, whatever. But whatever made them is not there.
Right. Yeah,
and
I get what you mean.
That is something. You whether that's energy or matter or whatever, that is something. And where does that go? And if science says, you can't just get rid of energy, it has to go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then where does it go? And it only makes sense that it goes somewhere, and why not into another vessel for another life?
Sure.
See, I believe him. I believe the kid. I believe, maybe he had these visions. He probably didn't want them. Obviously, he was having nightmares.
Mm-hmm.
And did the dad feed him? Maybe. But still, he had some crazy ideas of what, he saw. So, I believe him. I believe reincarnation's real and to a point, or where it goes, I don't know. But, that seems logical to me. And this kid, what he saw, and, my own experience with my children, yeah, man.
Okay.
that happens.
All right. Yeah, for me, I think it's hilarious what you just said, because for years I've been. Well, it's like you get asked about your beliefs if you're religious. I went to private Christian school. You know that I went with your wife.
Camp Davidian.
And we, so I've, and they weren't by any means at that school where they force feeding. I mean, the teachers were all really cool and
no. And I went to Catholic school, and
so they weren't pounding
not
that
on
shit
the
on
table.
us, right? They weren't pounding any beliefs into us. They were just giving us the information. It felt like I never felt like you hear a lot of stories about private schools and what they do, and that they're grooming kids just the same way as they talk about grooming kids on other issues, and it's like. I didn't feel like that at all. Especially since I came out the other end, not religious. So it was
and I was an altar boy. So
right. But when I'm asked about what I believe, my answer is always, well, I know this: energy cannot be created nor destroyed.
Right.
So when you die, it has to go somewhere. And so, and a personal story. My mom passed away from cancer. She was really bad, and hospice was there, and they had given her medicine to knock her out, and we called the family in because we knew it was only a matter of time, and literally the family came in and we sat around her bed as she took her last breath.
Sure.
And I can tell you, I felt it.
Yeah,
I physically felt. I know it sounds quirky and weird.
No, I don't.
I physically felt this, it was like this release of energy that passed through me. I could feel it when she stopped breathing. There was something tangible there. So to me, that's just my personal experience. I don't know if it was just because we were all solemn in the moment. I was,
So recently, my father-in-law passed, and I was gathering recyclables, and my wife came out and said he's gone, and I was literally a minute away. She was there when he passed. Yeah, it's different when you walk in. And my dad told me he was there when his dad passed, and he's like, he looked at her and said he's gone, isn't he? And she's like, just shook her head, and he's like, he could feel the same thing you said.
Yep. Yeah,
there's
something there. And so for me, the idea of reincarnation, you have to find out what consciousness is.
Right.
And if that energy can be transferred as consciousness when it's released. That to me, that's the question. And if that's possible, reincarnation is possible.
And even if it isn't, maybe there's remnants.
It's not total. I don't believe in total reincarnation. I don't believe that one person's entire soul and everything about them becomes this other person. I think they pick up pieces of them.
And even the Dalai Lama,
where
they believe in reincarnation, he only had pieces. And they honed that, and they developed that,
And I think that's why it starts out young and it fades as they get older, and not much older, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, they stop they stop remembering it, and it might just because that energy that was transferred in consciousness, it dissipates over time, and it's moving and flowing into other things
somewhere else, right?
Yeah, and you have, with your own consciousness, have locked it in, and you've held on to it for as long as you could until it went away. So there's a possibility for me of that. Now, am I saying that this kid was the reincarnation of James Houston Jr.? I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's super freaky, the stuff he knew. If it's true.
And my daughter was like, if you see her, just born pictures, she's super aware. She's not just like a baby. Like, my son is a baby. Mm-hmm. He's just, there. She is like, where am I? What the fuck is this? Right. She is like hyper aware. That's the only way I can describe it. And my mom was even like, I've never seen that. She's like, where am I?
Yeah.
She's like, I've never seen that look on a kid. And
because they say there's a talk of the feeling of falling in a hole and ending up in your mom's stomach.
Right.
So that's as the reincarnation happens, that you feel it, like when you die, instead of going into the light or whatever, you fall in, and the next thing you know, you're being born. You can't function properly because nothing's working the same. But like you said,
and it's nothing you get
alert. It's like some of it's showing.
Right. And she's, always ahead of everything. Socially, she's like not weird. Like my son's always embarrassed, and we're like, hey, say thank you or say hi, or
Yeah.
She's not that. Right. She is the
been there, done that.
Kinda. It's
Yeah.
like she's a very old soul.
Right.
And like when I said she was very
and that
flippant,
term itself didn't come out of thin air.
Right. And it, to me, like you said, that energy has to go somewhere. Mm-hmm. And it makes sense. And this kid, I know they wrote a book. They did write a book. But like, books only make so much money.
Yeah.
And he won't speak out on it. He's not like on TV. So I think it happened, man. I think that's very plausible, and it happens all the time.
I think it's possible. It's too anecdotal to say definitively this happened for me. Like, we're not going off of recordings or anything like that.
That's true. That's true.
It's all word of mouth, and it's all this happened, and we didn't influence it. We're sure of it, but you can't be sure. There's so many things that could have happened, and maybe they sparked his imagination when they took him to the museum, and there's all kinds of different things. But I'm gonna say that the people that tried to debunk him and stuff, I don't believe them as much as I believe him.
Me too.
You know what I mean? I think that they're bullshit.
Me too.
And I think that he is legit, has this emotion or feeling.
Agreed.
And that's very real, and that maybe that they harnessed it into this story, but that feeling he had was probably very real. But like I said, it's all kind of anecdotal. So
yeah, but I'm with you.
But I think it's totally possible in the realm of us not understanding basically anything. That when you said to its base, that energy
science.
Most people don't realize that energy is not a thing that you create. You don't like have a power plant and it's creating energy. It's just taking energy from somewhere else, transferring it into a different vessel or different type of energy. So it's not created, and you can't get rid of it. It doesn't get destroyed. It dissipates.
It's
that dissipation
part of the
is
problem with the Big Bang, and right. Mm-hmm. It's part of the whole issue. Like,
well, that was the whole thing with the Big Bang. The Big Bang was supposed to be this, this explosion that all explosions would die out over time. But we found out that space is expanding, and it's accelerating expansion. There's a great comedian that does a bit about all the stuff that we don't know, and he's like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I've seen that guy.
Yeah, it's great, man.
He's on a show called Crashing.
Yeah, and he's like, he says, what did he say?
We're in a rock.
Or hurling through space.
And everybody's like, okay.
Infinite space, and that infinite is expanding. That means infinity is getting bigger. That makes no sense. He's like, we're all made of molecules. Oh, okay.
Well, how come my hand doesn't go through this chair?
Yeah,
we don't know.
We don't know. That makes no fucking sense.
It's true.
That's so true. It was such a great bit. I mean, because that is the truth. But
that is the truth.
We don't know, and to say that we do, and like for me to give a definitive answer on this, I don't even think it's fair because it's so out of the realm of understanding.
I think your best explanation was your mom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and there is definitely a before and after.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I believe that 100%.
And like I said, I've been to a ton of funerals, and they're just not there.
Yeah, the reason why The Matrix was a good movie was because we physically are batteries.
Yes.
So
right. All right. So I think we solved reincarnation.
I think we settled it. You tell all those other religions to fuck off.
Well, at least like the idea of it, and
sure.
It's possible for this kid to have this, right?
Yeah. So shout out to Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, Sikhism, and Kabbalah Judaism.
Nice. And do we have a list of new countries?
We do, and these are blowing my mind, man. I can't get over some of these.
Me either.
So Qatar,
the World Cup.
Right. These guys buy athletes. It's great. I love that. They get on the Olympics and they're like, he's from Boston. That's great. They do. They buy the Olympics.
I know.
Which is great because they make a shit ton of money going there to compete for them, and we don't. We treat ours like shit. We don't give them any money. They don't give them shit. I think it's an outrage. But anyway, Hungary,
Uruguay,
Saudi Arabia,
Sri Lanka,
Kuwait. Didn't see
How
that one
about
coming.
Kuwait?
Come on.
Put
out them oil fires, and all of a sudden you got the internet. I'm sorry, Kuwait. That was wrong.
That was wrong. Slovenia.
Yes, Slovenia is an odd one too.
And I'm really surprised about the last one.
Oh,
Iceland.
Yeah, Iceland.
Shout out to
Iceland, land of fire and ice.
Have you seen the Will Ferrell movie Eurovision?
Yeah, yes.
It's pretty funny with the elves. They pray to the elves. And that's pretty funny.
There was a movie wasn't it Ben Stiller where he was in Iceland? Wasn't it?
I don't know.
Where he did this story. He was looking for
Sean
Penn's.
Okay.
Photographer or whatever. I think they were in Iceland when they did that.
God, what was that? And then he ended up going to he ended up going on Mount Everest.
Yeah. Yep.
God, what was the name of that movie? That's a great movie.
Yeah, it was a good movie. I can't remember what it was called though.
All right,
yeah, those are some great shout out to all those people, our new listeners.
I mean, we're growing.
Yeah, there's like 50 countries now, man.
How about that?
Yeah. It's like one person in each one, but whatever.
Who cares? Whatever. We'll take it. We love you guys.
All right.
All right. Well, I'm Anthony.
I'm Brandon.
And this is Everything That's Weird.
For show notes and merchandise, go to www.everythingthat'sweird.com. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter. And be sure to like, subscribe, and review anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Thank you for listening. See you next time.